Welcome to the finish line with Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today I'd like to finish this quilt top, and I want to do it with chains. I'm going to have chains going horizontal and chains going vertical. That's going to give a secondary pattern inside of the little blocks, so it has a nice impact. In order not to mark the quilt, I will be doing ruler work, so I will need a ruler foot. So if your machine is set up for ruler work, you can use it either on a sit-down machine or a domestic machine. So let's explore some different rulers that we will be able to use. Chain quilting is very simply chains that are going to go from block to block and back. So we will have this long row of chains going in one direction, and it will go in the other direction. So they will eventually make these secondary patterns inside those blocks. The easiest way to chain is to start and go from point to point, and then instead of going back up would be to go down. So we're going down, up, down, up. So we're making this wave shape. The reason is if we go from loop to loop and then we try to come back, we have to try to hit this area here and make that attach. So if we make a wave and then come back, when we do come back, we will automatically make that crossover. So it's more accurate. There's no chance of a space being left here. And it's easier to hit your mark with this way than trying to do this loop. But if you're more comfortable one way or than the other, there is no right or wrong way. If we do these skinny chains, it's going to leave us more room in the center. If we do fat chains, it will leave us less space. But if those chains are too big, the chains are going to look like they're running down the center versus running down that side. And if you have really big ones, you see they will cross over here. So then this is where it's going to look like it's crossing over, and I'll show you that with an example of a ruler. I do have a pattern where I have these half square triangles, and I won't be worried about those seams at all. I'm just going down and across the entire thing. So here's one of those half square triangles, and I won't be worried about those. I'm just going to go in those two directions. There are some areas where there's no seam. So I'm going to draw lines so that all of the blocks are the same size. And that's just going to help me keep things straight as I go along. So every single one of my blocks is the same size in this quilt. From here, we need to establish what ruler to use. And there's many different rulers that can work for this. A lot of round rulers will work, but you have to keep in mind that we do want to hit the point and that point. So this foot is 1/4 inch from the center over all the way around. So if you put your foot down, you should hit that intersection, and as you go around, you should hit that next intersection. So that's one thing we need to look at when we find a ruler. So this ruler does work from that intersection to intersection. But this is that area where we're going to have that large chain running down the center of the block, not along the seam. And that's fine, it just gives it a different look. I could slide it down. That outside will give me a very, very slight curve. So it's going to be a very long, thin chain. So that's not exactly what I'm looking for. Here's a ruler where the blocks fit right inside. So I can go from point to point, but that's going to give me that loop going over. I'm not doing that S or that curve. So I will have to make sure that I hit that point every single time. So we're looking at more of a slight curve. This edge would work, but you could see where this would be a very skinny long chain. So we could turn it to the other side, and that will definitely work, and that would give us a nice shape. So we would start here, we would stitch to this point, take that ruler, flip it over, stitch up, flip it over, and stitch. So we would be making that soft S, and then we're going to come back down and finish filling in that S. Here's another ruler that's going to work. It's going to go from point to point, so that's going to work. And then rotate that ruler so that I'm continuing that shape. And it gives us a medium-sized chain. Ovals definitely work really well for this. So I can use the inside, not the outside. When I put this ruler down, I do have that 1/4 inch that goes from point to point. And if I add in this filler, I have that full shape. So I'm going to be able to go from here to here, stop, pull that ruler over, and then go up, because that spacer is filling in that hole. Up, pull the ruler, and go. And then I'm going to be able to come back the same way. So I'm going to be using this oval, and I'm just going to tape in this filler so I can use that entire shape. I did draw in that extra line so I have equal blocks. I also marked these seams so you're able to see them. Because I do not have a seam on this one side, I'm going to just use the foot as a guide to help line up that ruler. And I can see I'm going to hit that intersection. So now I can move it over so I know I'm going to be in the right spot. And I'm going to pull up my thread. From here, I'm going to be able to start, and I'm going to do the first one, and I'll move my hands out of the way so you can see. So I'm going to stitch until that point. I've hit that point. The next side is going to come up. So I can just slide that ruler over, make sure that it's lined up. Now I'm going to go up. Stop, slide, slide, and continue. So I'm going to go all the way down. My last curve was this way. I'm going to come up, and because I'm going back in the direction, I'm just going to continue that loop all the way back to this point. So I am making that complete curve. Now I'm going to be able to continue and go down. Slide and go down. So I'm going in one direction, then I'm going back. I've come all the way down, and I'm on this very last piece, so I'll be able to just come right off. I'm just going to move that ruler a little bit out of the way and stitch right off. If you're on a pattern and you can turn that ruler and start to go up, by all means, you can do one row, another, go up and back. But I don't mind just doing one row at a time. I know it's a little hard to see, but here's that coming up and over. So when I've come back, I've crossed over. When the needle is down, we have a 1/4 inch from that needle to the outside on both sides of this foot, which means we need to have a 1/4 inch from this edge over. So we have that 1/4 inch. If your ruler has markings, be sure to use those. this horizontal line is going to match this line here. I did not have a 1/4 inch, so I've added it. So this edge of the tape is going to follow that seam allowance. And that gives me that guaranteed mark. And it's going to be the same for the other side. So I do have the markings also in this side. I have that one mark will go along there. That edge of the tape is going to go along that edge. And if you don't have markings on your ruler, just add them in. It's going to save us time having to check that that is a 1/4 inch. Another thing is sometimes this is not exactly the measurement we need. Fabric does move, so we can move it a little bit. Just pull it a little bit, line it up, hold that ruler down and stitch. We don't want to pull too tight, but we can pull just a little bit to take that slack out so that we hit that 1/4 point and that point. It is important that the edge of this foot runs along the edge of this ruler. And that gets us right to that point. There's another way that we can line up this point if both of those ends are not fitting. Have the end where the needle is coming out against the ruler. Line up the straight line and stitch until about the center. Stop and then slide that ruler. And continue stitching. Once all of those rows are done, we do have one row left, and that's this last border row. We won't be able to do a full chain, so we're going to have to do a half chain. The first thing we want to do is mark a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to need that so that we can line up that crossbar. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be stitching around, go right to the edge, and then we're going to go back up. And then go around, go back up. This back up is only going to go to that 1/4 inch mark, but we're going to stitch right to the edge and then go back. I still will be using those marks on my ruler. So I have that cross mark, and I do want that 1/4 inch right there at that point. So I'm going to stitch around, go right to that edge and back up. So I go past that 1/4 inch mark and then go back up to that 1/4 inch mark. That 1/4 inch mark is duplicating a seam. Move that ruler, line up everything, go right to the edge and come back up. I'm going to fill that space in the same as I've done everywhere else. If it doesn't line up, I'm going to stitch to that halfway mark, slide that ruler so it lines up, and finish. Go to the edge and come back up to that 1/4 inch mark. So I'm going to do that to the entire edge. Then the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch all the way around this edge, less than that 1/4 inch. That's going to anchor down all of those seams for me, and it'll be covered by the binding. No matter what ruler you use, if you do have some markings, be sure to use them, and if you don't, add some markings. It's just going to speed up some time, and it's going to keep it more accurate. So I have that edge done, one direction and the other. It does have a circular shape, but it also has this chain shape. And in these little intersections, we will have this little flower shape. With that background being dark, the front dark, and the thread dark, you really don't notice if you've missed these little intersections. I did use a black thread And that way it's all going to blend in. I love seeing this design come together because we do end up with secondary designs. We end up with big circles and some flowers. And it works out really easy when we have a quilt that is almost marked for us by having equal size squares throughout the entire quilt. Change the ruler, change the curve, and we can also change the angle and go on the diagonal instead of the straight. I do hope you give it a try. Just choose a ruler that you're comfortable with and have some fun. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter, all under Sew Very Easy. Come on back. Let's see what we're working on next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.